Yep.
Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the latest Kent Invicta Live webinar. I'm Andrew Metcalf. I'm a board member of Kent Invicta Chamber of Commerce. It's my pleasure to host and chair this afternoon. Cybersecurity and due diligence is yet another of those business critical issues that we want to focus on over the next few weeks. And so while we've been all under lockdown, working from home, those pesky digital fraudsters have been very busy. And there's a need for us all to get our cyber houses in order to make sure that we don't leave ourselves vulnerable. So while businesses are rightly looking towards recovery, we do need to be vigilant. We do need to be prepared in terms of our own cybersecurity for when that recovery happens. And we don't want to do anything that's going to damage our own chances of recovery. So the fact that we're all here today shows that we haven't got our head in the sands, thank goodness. The webinar will be recorded and then it will be uploaded to the Chamber website, and we'd ask you all to share it with your contacts and within your networks to make sure we get the message out as far and as wide as possible. So today's guest experts are Neil Miller, who's the Managing Director of TenIntelligence based at Kings Hill. He's got more than 20 years of experience in the corporate security and investigation sector. He has also international case experience in due diligence, intelligence gathering, brand protection, asset tracing, surveillance, and fraud investigation. All sounds very detailed, so looking forward to hearing from him. And we've also got Antonio Fletcher, who's a partner at Brachers. He's in the employment team based in Maidstone. He's got significant experience in advising clients on data protection matters, such as data subject access requests and breach reporting. He frequently undertakes audits for clients to ensure that their data protection processes are robust and importantly comply with legal requirements. So again, another expert witness effectively for us to hear from today. So it's all about expert insight into issues of cybersecurity. So what we're going to do is we'll hand over shortly to Neil. Then there'll be a question and answer session afterwards. If you can send your questions in via the chat button, which is at the bottom of your screen, and privately direct them to myself and also to Molly Hall, who's the host. At the end of each presentation, we'll go through them and I'll have a quick one-to-one session in terms of Q&As with Neil, and also we'll do the same for Antonio. Then we'll have a quick roundup at the end, and then I'll just give a quick update on other events that we're organising within the Chamber. So without further ado, can I pass over to Neil, who'll then share his screen and talk us through his presentation. Thanks, Neil.
Sure thing, thank you. One moment. Can you see that?
Not at the moment. Got it. Thanks, Neil.
Okay, good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Neil Miller, founder of TenIntelligence. We are a team of fraud investigators, due diligence specialists, and we also advise on cyber, brands, and data protection matters based here in the UK and in Dubai. Firstly, thank you to Andrew and the Kent Chamber for inviting me to help share our fraud and cyber awareness campaign with you. I would like to start with some frightening headlines. The UK's National Cybersecurity Centre has removed more than 2,000 online scams in this last month. Losses have approached at least £1 million as the Action Fraud UK has seen a reported 400% increase in coronavirus-related fraud. And Gmail is blocking 18 million COVID-19 themed phishing emails every single day. As you know, over the last couple of months, COVID-19 has caused widespread disruption across the world. Businesses and organisations have either shut down or have been forced to adopt unprecedented changes to the way that we operate, which is why we need to remain as vigilant as ever. Over the last month, the team at TenIntelligence have been analysing the emerging trends of new or increased acts of fraudulent activity arising from the current crisis. Fraudsters see no boundaries and do not discriminate. They are highly motivated, usually by financial gain. Yet inconceivably, they rationalise their decisions whilst the world is in lockdown, as they see this as an opportunity to thrive on our fear and vulnerability. Now, this continues to be a fast-paced situation and has caught many people and organisations by surprise. Many were and are still very much underprepared. And now that we're all working remotely, fraudsters will take advantage. Now, our recent campaign is to spread awareness of just some of the common types of fraud and cyber-enabled crimes targeted towards our clients and fellow Kent Chamber members. In these next few slides, I've highlighted several emerging frauds trends arising during this time. Now, some of you may have seen these already or experienced these. Many of you will have thankfully spotted them, yet not everyone will see them, especially the most vulnerable, as many of these scams will look very authentic to the untrained or unsuspected eye. These are a selection of fake awareness emails, encouraging end users to click on a link. They appear to be helpful, stating terms such as everything you need to know or IT COVID update. And they will often include well-known logos such as the WHO, World Health Organization, or in some scams that we have recently seen, the recipient's actual company logo. Now, if you take a closer look, you can see a typo in the top left-hand corner, but this is not always the case. These are some examples of text-related messages that users have received on their mobile phones. Again, enticing the user to click through to the link, usually with an offer of relief money. And these are some examples with their own government logos, and they look relatively authentic, especially if you have registered your email address with the HMRC. Many of you might actually anticipate receiving correspondence from the government and unfortunately click on these links. We're all probably ordering a lot more goods and products online from auction sites and shopping sources. Be careful. Always check the seller's details, verify the origin, and especially look at the feedback reviews, looking for negative customer comments. If it's too good to be true, it probably is, and you pay for what you get, or in some of these cases, what you don't get. You might also be buying counterfeit goods, which are a danger to your safety. There have been examples that counterfeit sanitizers are actually using bleach instead of alcohol, causing significant burn injuries to hands. And then there's the closet scam, sextortion. You know, the one that reads, "I can see you." If you receive one of these sextortion emails, don't worry, they are all scams. Block the sender and delete the emails from your junk box. Now, please keep an eye out for phishing emails, advising that your mailbox is full, but you can increase your storage space free of charge by clicking on the link provided. Watch out for emails and text messages to parents, carers offering free school meals for their children, subject to providing their bank details. Be vigilant to unregistered charities and GoFundMe style pages requesting financial donations for COVID-19 related projects and sponsorship. We've also seen an increase in applications from fake funding and grant businesses offering low rate deals. Watch out for fraudsters requesting advance fees to assist with emergency supply chain procurement and then disappearing once payment has been made. Emails offering TV license refunds and supermarket delivery slots. And those, especially with older children, where we have seen an increase in PlayStation, console, and game-based free download ransomware scams, including Corona tracking apps. I'd like to share some basic methods to help keep you and your family secure at home. Ensure a remote laptop and device systems are updated. Regularly update all antivirus software platforms. When you are finished working, don't just close the lid of your laptop without shutting down properly, as most laptops initiate the updates when they go through this shutdown process. Secure your home Wi-Fi network and ensure your device firewalls are on, and if possible, switch on a trusted virtual private network or VPN. Please make sure you're not using the default password which is written on your Wi-Fi router, as these can easily be found online, allowing fraudsters to hack into your Wi-Fi. Apply strong passwords and implement two-factor authentication on all devices. A strong password could be a memorable sentence that only you know. However, a caveat here, please don't change any of the settings on your employer's laptop unless acknowledged by your employer, as he may actually be in breach of your contractual obligations. And I'm sure Antonio will talk about this a little later. There is another threat, an internal one. Unfortunately, employee fraud will increase during this period, and it will likely be uncovered when we finally return to the new norm. A recent study by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners states that organisations lose 5% of its revenue to fraud each year. Interestingly, 80% of those reported frauds in this study were employees who were or are facing some form of discipline or change at work. Now, this is a vital consideration, as many employees in the UK have been furloughed, placed on reduced hours and income, and therefore suffering from financial difficulty, stress and shortfall. Yet some employers still grant them the access to sensitive documents, personal information and client organization, often referred to as the fraud triangle. So during this period, it might be useful to ask yourself whether you could be adding fuel to the fraud. So ask, do they have the opportunity? During these times, yes, working remotely means no one is looking and they might have access to the crown jewels. And what is their motivation? This is usually some form of financial pressure, such as reduced income or even revenge against the employer. And how do they rationalize their actions? In our experience, fraudsters will often say, I'm not a criminal, or I deserve this money for all the hard work that I did. Or they were going to make me redundant anyway. The most common phrase we hear is, I was only borrowing the money. According to this study, 85% of all fraudsters displayed at least one behavioural red flag. Whether they are living beyond their means, going on luxurious holidays, expensive lifestyles, putting their children through private education, etc. Or are they suffering from financial difficulties, possibly a gambling habit or a credit card or family debts? Do they have an unusually close association with the supplier or client? Could they be receiving bribes? And do they have control issues? And are they unwilling to share duties, as this is often a way of concealing a fraud? And these are just a selection of the red flags. Keep a watch out for these current COVID-19 fraud trends, and there are many. Data breaches relating to remote working and unauthorized access to personal information. There are concerns about unprotected devices that would not be permitted in the workplace being used by employees working from home. Disgruntled, furloughed, redundant employees stealing company information such as client lists and proposals. And with call centres moving to home working, there are concerns that organised crime groups might look to exploit these. So how can organisations protect themselves from fraud? Awareness is key. Ensure all colleagues know about these frauds. Keep talking with and listen to your employees. Understand and where possible support their challenges. If a suspicion of fraud has arisen, trust your instincts and develop the next course of action. And of course, notify your bank immediately if you see any unusual activity on your account. Verify all invoices, as well as requests to change bank account details. Implement checks and measures, verify and review, check with a colleague. Don't be afraid to escalate the issue. Always review financial transactions to check for inconsistencies and errors, such as misspelt names of payees. And to check if a request is legitimate, contact the supplier directly using established contact details you have on file, preferably by phone. And don't just reply by email, just in case this email address has been compromised or is monitored by the fraudster. Access to sensitive financial information should be carefully controlled. Dispose of confidential documents, especially at home, by cross-threading them. Don't just dispose them in the bin. Perform background checks and due diligence on all new third parties to help reduce the likelihood of fraud. Finally, please remain vigilant whilst working online. Do not click on emails or links that you cannot verify. I would like to end by giving you a task for you to consider at home. This anti-hack site will help you find out whether your email has been compromised or has been involved in a data breach. It might also reveal your past and present passwords that are available openly online and your details being targeted by cyber criminals. Check your work and personal emails and ask your friends and your family to do the same. In summary, don't take it for granted that your systems and devices are secure. Awareness and acting quickly is key. So our message today is to please share these scams and some of the simple protection methods with your colleagues, your family and friends, helping you to stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. That was an excellent summary. Very thought-provoking. Questions then to me privately then through the chat if possible. Got one here already. Neil, how do you report a fake email? Say for instance, you find one, what do you then do? What's your, the top 10 or the top 3 tips?
The first thing you should do is securely remove it from your system. That's one thing, but before you do so, you need to report it if you can to Action Fraud, and also block the sender from being able to use that email address to your system again.
Okay, and Action Fraud is what? Is that the government body or the? Yeah,
so the UK Action Fraud is the nation's body for reporting fraud and these kind of things. It's a data sharing platform where many police forces and authorities are able to then filter down and look through certain data sets, including email addresses, names, bank account details, and trying to correlate them with current investigations. It's not a place where you can report a cyber scam or fraud and expect anything back directly from the police, unfortunately. It's very much a data sharing platform, and people, the authorities will certainly be monitoring it.
And in terms of the financial impact on your businesses, what recourse do you have with banks?
It depends what you've got in place, what process and procedures you have in place. Do you audit your systems? Do you understand where your crown jewels are? Can you demonstrate exactly where your data is, and what have you done to help prevent any kind of cyber scams occurring in your organization? So the banks will often look at that, and the insurance companies as well, if you've got cyber insurance, will look at that first to see if your claim is actually legitimate, because if you haven't put the prevention measures in place, then they may say, well, this is null and void, you need to do more to protect yourselves, and obviously the bank and insurance company. Most banks are very savvy, they're very much aware, and they're all doing, I don't know if you listen to the radio or see the TV at the moment, but they're all on this like a rash. They're all talking about protecting yourselves online at this time. There's lots of fraud awareness campaigns going on. So just keep an eye on what's going on out there.
And the issue of cybersecurity insurance, what percentage of businesses have that in place?
That's a good question. I don't know. Not many people will actually divulge information. I think the point is most people who employ cyber insurance are using it as protection against their company. But the point I made earlier is what they're not doing, and that's the prevention side of things. They need to be able to be seen and demonstrate and provide evidence that they are trying to protect themselves. So I would recommend having cyber assurance. That yes, of course, but you've got to do your due diligence as well.
That's a bit like after the horse is bolted, isn't it? And saying, oh, yeah. Oh dear, please can I have some money now because someone's just done me fraud. Comments on here. Can we have the link again for checking our email addresses? I take it that was the avast.com/hackcheck. Is that right? Correct.
It's a safe website. Avast is a software security platform that you might want to consider for your organization. There are very many others, of course, but they provide this free service that you put your email address in, use your personal email addresses, your work ones, your colleagues, all those kind of things, and it will send that email address an alert to say whether your password, your email address has actually been used before or might have been exposed to a data breach. And it gives you a step-by-step guide as to where the data breach is or was, and also the passwords that might be subject to it as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me that the interesting one is we're all working from remotely. We're all getting emails in that could be from HMRC and everybody else, and it must be so easy now to just pull one together and send it off to various people. I hope there's been no sort of fraudulent emails from Action Fraud. That'd be quite ironic.
I wouldn't be surprised if that will be the next thing.
Yeah, there probably has. Best I don't say that out loud. I might have given someone an idea. There you go. So Neil, thank you for that. What we'll do now, if we can hand over to Antonio, who will take us through his presentation on issues to consider to make sure you're legally compliant. And then what we'll do after that is we'll then have a round table and a round table discussion. Thanks, Neil, and thanks, Antonio.
For our discussions. Oh, sorry, I think I've just been unmuted, so I may have just been talking to myself for a moment there, so apologies. Thank you to Neil, and thank you to you all for attending today. As per the introduction, I'm a partner in the employment team at Brachers. I do a lot of work on the data protection side of things as well, and I do see a lot of instances where there are particularly breaches of personal data that do need to then be reported and progressed, which I'll talk about in a moment. Neil's touched on this in his presentation, but certainly the big factor in any kind of cyber issue is often the human element. I've mentioned at the top the Morrison's case that has been trundling on for about 7 years now, and we finally got a decision at Supreme Court level on the 1st of April this year. Now this is a classic example of a disgruntled employee who released 100,000 colleagues' personal data onto the wider world, in essence for no better reason than he was upset with his employer. Now, as the case has progressed through its various stages, there have been differences of opinion as to whether Morrisons were themselves vicariously liable towards the people whose data had been released by this individual. The Supreme Court has, thankfully for employers, concluded that they were not vicariously liable because what he did was not part of his normal duties associated with his work, but was instead a very clear act of unreasonable behaviour on his part, and part of a vendetta in essence against Morrisons. Now that's an extreme example, the fact that this has gone through the courts for 7 years will hopefully mean that in future other employers won't have to go through the courts for 7 years to get an outcome if they are called to be vicariously liable. However, it is an example of the amount of disruption that an employee can cause. And as Neil has rightly pointed out, we live in a time at the moment where people may have concerns and issues with their employer. They may not be happy about how they've been treated. Hopefully, in many cases, most people will recognise the difficulty of the times we're in, but there will be circumstances where that isn't the case. Certainly, I would say with individuals that are on furlough leave, employers should think carefully about whether they should continue to have access to systems during periods of furlough, not only for the risks associated with cybersecurity, but also whilst individuals are on furlough leave, it is a condition of receiving the reimbursements of their salaries from the government that they do no work. So on the basis that they are clearly not there is no desire for them to be doing any work whilst they're on furlough leave, then disconnecting them from systems might also be a good idea from that perspective. Certainly where individuals are being made redundant or cease working for employers, there is certainly a good reason to recall any equipment you have from them and try and collect any hardware, software, etc. that they use as part of their activities in employment from them as soon as possible. Beyond rogue employees, though, it's important to think about basic human errors. We do live in unprecedented times at the moment. We are managing circumstances where individuals are having to do substantial amounts of work from home. Many people are likely to be unfamiliar with those types of working arrangements, and there is a question as to whether they are letting their guard down compared to what they would be doing whilst at work. There's certainly examples that I've heard of where simple errors are being made more frequently, that is leading to data breaches and things like that, just purely unexplained, but just potentially people letting their guard down because they're at home and not at their usual place of work. The arrangements themselves might be unfamiliar. We are all getting more and more familiar with platforms like Zoom as part of our normal working arrangements, but it's definitely a step away from what people would consider to have been normality a month ago. And the other factor there is people may be using personal devices to do work where you don't have systems that are transferable to home working, and the security that is related to those systems, and whether people are updating the cybersecurity settings and so on their systems, and malware preventing software, etc. To the extent that they should be on their home devices, or even doing basic things like Neil said, of not using the standard router password on your Wi-Fi. Whether everyone is doing that is certainly a big question mark. I very much doubt that they are. In terms of your own policies and procedures as a business, it is very important to firstly know what they say as a business owner and as a person in charge of any data security and working processes within your business. So first question, have you reviewed those? And in reviewing those, have you reached a conclusion as to whether they're fit for purpose? Do they cover things like home working? Do they cover the use of home hardware? Do they cover what is needed where you are providing the hardware and the systems for people to use? As Neil said, it's very important that people don't, in those circumstances, change with the settings that come as standard, because they might compromise your entire system. And thinking about whether your policies cover home working and cover the use of people's own devices. And then once you've thought about that, it's important to think about whether your staff are also familiar with those policies and procedures, and do those employees know what is actually expected of them in these unprecedented times. From a legal perspective, certainly you might have contractual obligations with regards to clients' confidential information that may be passed to you in part as part of the services that you provide for them. You may also, as a consequence of the changes related to GDPR a couple of years ago, be under data processing agreements and have obligations there contractually to protect data and confidential information. Beyond those contractual obligations, it's also important to be mindful of the standards set by the Information Commissioner, who is our body that is responsible for data protection matters here in the UK. And whilst they have said in guidance over the last month or so that certainly where any matters come to their attention, they will take into consideration the extreme circumstances that we're in at the moment, the impact that these circumstances have on businesses and have on businesses' abilities to comply with their obligations as data processors. It's also fairly clear from reading that guidance that they do still have certain expectations for what needs to happen. They do expect people to adhere to data protection standards that are in place and to abide by the contents of their privacy notices that are issued to individuals to as great an extent as they possibly can. Where we're talking about data subject access requests, the usual 1 month time limit to comply with a data subject access request will continue to apply. Now, whilst it might not be possible to comply with that request within that time frame for reasons related to the circumstances the company is in, it will then have to be a matter of convincing the ICO, if a complaint is made, that it was justified and that the circumstances that particular business found itself in were exceptional and meant that they couldn't comply within that 1 month time limit. Similarly, where a data breach occurs and personal data is disclosed in an unauthorized way or is sent to the wrong person, the ICO has made clear that its expectation that a report is made to the ICO without undue delay remains in place, and they still expect this to be within 72 hours. Again, the onus will be on the business in question to show that exceptional circumstances apply if that is not done within that 72 hour time limit. So my recommendations at this moment in time, as I say, is to make sure you review your policies and procedures, in particular relating to data protection, to the use of electronic equipment, and to home working throughout the business world. This will cover most of the areas where you're potentially going to be particularly at risk around data protection and cybercrime. And make sure that these are circulated amongst staff regularly. Just sending out the policy once probably isn't enough at the moment, particularly if home working continues much further into the future. Once you've checked that your policies do what you need them to do, remind people of aspects of those policies regularly and send out extracts or the entire policy to people when you do. And highlight those key points within the policy that you want to reinforce. Keep an eye on the ICO website, the Information Commissioner's Office. They are posting regular updates about what expectations are and what their experiences are at the moment. So it's always worth keeping an eye on that. It's also worth bearing in mind that where you do have staff on furlough, and even where you've got people who are continuing to work and work from home, now is a good time to provide any training to those workers on an online platform in relation to matters such as cybersecurity and thinking about this side of things, because that is permitted as part of what furloughed workers are allowed to do. And I just wanted to thank you again and take any questions very happily. Thank you.
Thanks, Antonio. That's brilliant. It's funny, isn't it? The whole pace at which we've had to adopt home working. I'll put my own hand up. I'm not sure. I haven't checked our policies yet to see whether we have got them in terms of using our colleagues' hardware, or what policies we've got in terms of home working. And I'm sure that many people, many businesses who, when faced with that immediate, oh my God, we're in lockdown, quickly, how do we get things sorted and set up as quickly as possible? The last thing they were probably thinking about was their policies and procedures. But
Yep.
As we move now through recovery and then onwards to probably more people working from home on a regular basis, it's probably more important now than ever to get those policies in place, I suppose. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you can certainly appreciate that on day one of lockdown and home working, this wasn't top of everyone's priority list. Whether it should have been or not, I suppose, is another matter. But it probably wasn't. But now that there's a bit of time and the dust has settled, it's certainly worth taking these steps if they haven't been already.
Okay. Let's just see what questions we've got coming through. Okay, so as a business, we're not set up to take payments other than on our card machine. We take card payments over the phone for deliveries. Is this not advised? That's probably more to Neil, I would have thought, than yourselves, Antonio. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, I would say I can talk from our sort of practice. We will take payments by card over the telephone, certainly much more readily than we would be happy to receive bank details via emails, etc. Because there's more risk in taking what's set out in an email as gospel than what someone says to you over the telephone.
Okay.
But I will bow to Neil because I'm sure he will have other thoughts on this.
What's your thoughts, Neil?
The immediate thought comes to mind is sharing bank details, bank cards, PIN numbers. Do you want to reduce that as much as possible? Yeah. But if you're actually a supplier or an online supplier, it's how you protect your consumers' data and their personal information is key. That's it. Again, goes down to where are your crown jewels and how do you protect them?
And the question here, does home working policy apply to small charities? I take it does.
Yeah, I mean, sort of any organisation or business can have a home working policy. I think probably a relatively small proportion do at the moment, but I think as the world changes, and this is, if anything, I think the current situation has just served as an accelerator to the way things were progressing anyway, that more and more people will work from home. So it is increasingly crucial to have clear policies, and a clear home working policy would be one of those I would suggest that people have in future.
And I take it the more people that work from home, Neil, the easier the chances for data breaches and fraud.
Unfortunately, yes. It goes back to the awareness point, making sure that as employers, it is your responsibility to keep employees in line, make sure that they're fully appraised with what's going on, what they can, what they can't do. But it's also who has access. You have to start thinking about which employees have access and do they need access to any of these sensitive documents. So there's a lot to consider, and I think both Antonio and I could go on for hours and hours. But I think the main message is just take stock. We're getting through this period now where we're starting to respond to the current situation. We're starting to go up our own curve in terms of working in a new way. And it's all about keeping aware, keeping vigilant, and communicating. I think that's probably the key.
And I suppose responding quickly as soon as you've found a an issue.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And it's like Antonio says, if it's a breach of personal information, then you've got to demonstrate to the RCO, the regulator, within the 72 hours that you've done something about it, that you've started investigating it, you've started to identify what happened, how it happened, where the information might be, and like I say, it's all about the communication piece. The ICO aren't going to, fine you whatever it is, 4% of your annual turnover, if you do help demonstrate that you're doing something about it. If you do nothing, like you said at the start, and you bury your head in the sand, that's when the ICO will probably start thinking, no, come on, you got to do better than that.
Yeah, I'd add to that sort of that 72-hour breach reporting isn't just sort of 72 hours to sort of start getting ready and get something out to the ICO. Realistically, by the time you're reporting it to the ICO, you want to be able to show that you've got a handle on it, and you've learnt from the experience, and you've done whatever you can to make sure that people's data isn't at risk.
And I suppose data breaches aren't just the domain of the likes of British Airways or NHS services or whatever. We've all got a responsibility as businesses because of the data we hold on clients and suppliers. Is that right?
Definitely, yeah. It's I think as with sort of cybercrime in generally, actually, you find that most of the issues actually are occurring with smaller businesses, whether that's intentionally or unintentionally, just simply because their systems might not be all that that a bigger business may have.
Another question here is, as a business, should we encourage remote working within servers?
Within servers, again, it goes back down to who has access, which employees are you giving access to the server information to? If you outsource that function to an outsourced IT company, then you've got to have that relationship. You've got to check, do your due diligence, do your audit and controls, and just make sure that they can't access anything else, or they don't switch off something that they shouldn't be switching off. But I think that the main point is, is that access control. Make sure you know who has access to what part of the information or part of the business that you need to protect.
And a practical question. I don't know, it's one here actually. A client of mine had a data breach this morning as someone working from home sent an email to the wrong person with an attachment that had personal data.
Okay, so before Antonio gets into the legal speak, the main thing you need to do, if you are transferring data out of your business to another third party, whether it's within your business or even if it's to a vendor or anybody else, with personal information in it, it has to be password protected. You can't send personal information out or data client sheets or any kind of information relating to your staff without it being password protected. If it's an attachment, from a legal point of view, I'm sure Antonio will probably go into a little bit more detail, but you've got to try and recall it as soon as possible, but it's done, it's out there. And that's where you would probably need to think about what your next steps are in terms of contacting the ICO, what internal investigations you need to look at to make sure it doesn't happen again, and what prevention measures you can put in place.
Yeah, I'll add to that. In essence, I think the analysis that needs to be done there is what exactly has gone out and to whom. Do we know who the recipient of that email is? If so, have we tried to contact them? Have we sought assurances from them that they have deleted the email and the information contained therein? Do we trust them if they do say that to us? I always think the example is if you're sending an email to let's say Joe Blogs, if you sent it to joeblogs@hotmail.com rather than joeblogs@hotmail.co.uk, you have no idea who the recipient is. and that's potentially a greater risk than if, rather than sending the email to Joe Bloggs, you've sent it to Joe Smith, who is a well-known associate of yours, and you picked up the phone to him, and Joe Smith says, "Oh no, don't worry, I've deleted it, not looked at it." And if you then trust the person that you're speaking to, then the risk is lower. And equally, what is contained within that email is also very relevant, because if you've got very sensitive information there about a person, then the risk to them will be higher than if it's just simply an email address and maybe a first name.
Thank you for that. One of the questions that, Neil, was what you raised on the home router that we've all got in our, sitting on, by the front door or whatever. It's got a password on the bottom. Are you saying we should all change our passwords on our home routers?
Yeah, there'll be your default password that BT, Sky, whoever your provider are, will set on a box. And that kind of information is just available, either online or on the dark web, where people collate information. They've got nothing better to do, I suppose. But it's out there in the public domain, and you have to, whenever you get a new provider or a new router, the first thing you should do is log on to the router's IP address, which is also on the back of the router usually, and just change the password to something that is only memorable to you and your family. That way, at least it's one element of security, securing your home Wi-Fi networks. Nobody can eavesdrop or hack into your Wi-Fi or use your Wi-Fi. So yes, it's one of the first steps that you should always consider.
Well, I, for one, have learned something quite important. I'll shortly be running to this. I'll be back in 5 minutes. Oh my God, right, okay. I think most people will be probably worried about changing the password, forgetting it, and then losing their internet access, thinking, because then the kids the kids will go off and there'll be a small nuclear device set off in the lounge or their bedroom. No, brilliant, thank you for that, Neil. That's amazing.
Sorry for frightening you.
How much of an idiot I am, to be honest, but there you go, nothing new. Do we have any further questions, or shall I? Right, I don't think we. Oh, there's one here. With an expectation that lockdown restrictions may be relaxed, what should businesses be thinking about now about returning to work with regards to social distancing, etc.? That's probably not one relating to the actual IT or IP. It's probably more one for you, Antonio, in terms of what should they be thinking about to make sure they've got a safe workplace, I suppose.
Well, to be honest, we plugging ourselves slightly, we've got a whole webinar series coming out in the next couple of weeks. There's not a lot to say about that in that can do it justice within a couple of minutes, but there is a lot to think about from various aspects of the business. I mean, crucially, health and safety will be sort of near the top of the list, and making sure that any advice that can be sought as to how people can come back to the workplace in a safe way will be one of the certainly most crucial elements of it. People will also still be in various different personal situations where they're having to look after children or act as carers towards more vulnerable people. So people will be making flexible working requests and knowing how to manage those, and and keeping on top of the government guidance as well will be crucial. So there is a lot to talk about. I'll say, giving ourselves a plug, we are about to launch a whole new webinar series just on this topic.
Thanks, Antonio. I don't think there's. I know we're all expecting Mr. Johnson today to get up at the press conference and give us some good news. I personally, my understanding from contacts we've got up, number 10 or wherever, is it's going to be very minor changes, if anything at all, over the next few days, especially given what's going on in Germany and elsewhere. So I think we're probably a little bit ahead of ourselves in terms of as we move towards reducing lockdown restrictions, but let's see, let's all hope. And when it happens, let's all do it safely. Can I say thank you to both Neil and Antonio for that? That's absolutely superb in terms of very concisely telling us what we need to think about with regards to cybersecurity, making sure we're vigilant and making sure that we remain safe. But no, thank you very much for that. And just a quick update in terms of where we are, what's going on over the next sort of couple of weeks. On next Thursday the 7th of May, we have a business continuity webinar, and that's with speakers Rich Dean from Supersonic Playground and Luke Quilter from Sleeping Giant Media. That's going to be hosted by the Chamber's Chief Executive, Joe James. So that's one to log into. 10:30 in the morning on Thursday the 7th. On the following Tuesday at 10:30, we've got a virtual networking event, which is sponsored by Furley Page. There'll be a guest speaker, and then there'll be a chance to virtually network with virtual breakout rooms. Not quite sure how that's going to be. I might have to check into that one myself, actually. Probably be in a little room talking to myself as usual. But we'd like also your thoughts as Chamber members, please, on what subjects we should be considering that are business critical to us all going forward. So that means that we can organise webinars like this, like in terms of business recovery and all those sort of issues. So if you can please let us know either by email or on the chat privately now, that'd be fantastic, and we can put that in place for you. Before I go, I need to give a big plug to the COVID-19 Business Helpline. Now, this is offered by Kent and Medway Growth Hub. It's delivered by the Kent Invicta team on behalf of KCC and every one of the local authorities in the county. Absolutely amazing service. I think over the last 4 weeks, they've taken more than 5,000 calls from businesses. They've offered more than 1,600 free one-to-ones with business advisors who are taking them through all the issues over finance, funding, where they can go and get grants, what they need to do in terms of who they need to speak to about HR issues, all those sort of issues that we're all coming across our desks or our kitchen tables, depending on where we are. That's open Monday to Friday, 8:30 till 5. And the phone number, if you want to quickly take it down, is 03333 602 300. I'll say that again, it's 03333 602 300. As I said, it is a free service. It's really important that it's there for you to use, make the most of. It's funded by KCC and the districts, so that's got to be good news. That's brilliant. Just someone's just sent me through on the private chat. I'm running my first scan now, thanks, and no problems found for link being unseen.
Great stuff.
Several things at once, and listen, well done. That's from Ellie. So Ellie, you get the gold star. You've got the
well
link,
done, Ellie.
And you're also clean. So that's fantastic. So I think all that's now required for me is to say thank you very much to everybody. Thank you to everyone who's joined. As I said, it was recorded. It will be uploaded. Please share it. We need all the information, the great information that you could buy, but you've been given it for free today by Antonio and Neil. Share it with your networks, please, so that we don't find ourselves being the subject of cybercrime and cybersecurity. So I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to go and have a cup of coffee, I think, and a piece of cake. So thanks, guys, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Cheers, guys.